Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, and I got a review for you today. Today we're going to be talking about from Image Comics, Mirka and Adolfo, Sweet Paprika, Black, White, and Pink, issue number 1. This is the Frank Chow cover, but it had various artists from the majority of the community, like such as Mayaka Soso, Arthi Depends, David Tallahassee, Andrew Hickenbottom are some of a few, and Mirka herself. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe. That does help this channel. It's all free. It's just interaction between you and me. But basically, this is a book that features 6 short stories from the Sweet Paprika universe. Some take place after, some are during. And there's a couple before, but they're basically all involving or tying up like loose ends from the 12-issue series that Sweet Paprika was. I'm not going to go into too many details because there is 6 short stories, plus that I do want you to go out and read this book. Another fair warning before I get started, there is a ton of nudity. Sweet Paprika is known for nudity, and there is a lot, especially explicit stuff going on in this book. So if that bothers you, you might want to click off, or I don't know. Yeah, but there's a lot of it in it. But first page, bam, there we go. There is a sex scene right off the bat, and this story is kind of one of my favorites. It's called Artemisio Unleashed, and if you know who Artemisio is, that is Sweet Paprika's father. And we're actually starting out like a long time before Sweet Paprika was even born, and it's basically how like Pepper, which is Sweet Paprika's mom, and Artemisio hooked up, and it's that like fateful day when they actually conceived Paprika. But it goes into this backstory because eventually this story jumps forward, and it's all about how Artemisio is still not like finding anybody in the world. He's not dating ever since Pepper left him. He did have that one occasion that got blasted online, but that's about it. And the whole rest of the story is kind of like that. He's eventually talking to like kind of a counselor that's trying to help him, kind of relocate back into the world of dating, that is, and eventually it kind of leads him to a blind date on a dating app. He does take the advice from the counselor and goes on this date, and it ends up being this like older woman, but she's kind of more his class. You can see in the background there's this other lady that's kind of listening to everything that goes on in their date, and eventually we find a lot more about that other girl because she intervenes and kind of makes the other girl just straight up leave, because she shows that scene that Artemisio is famous for, the sex scene where he was doing drugs, and I think it was at a strip club or something like that. But this girl eventually tells him that he has a huge fan following, and that basically it like liberated a bunch of like uptight like worker type people, not just women but men too, where they were literally quitting their jobs because they hated their jobs, and now they're like living this more carefree life. And for those who don't know, Artemisio was like a supreme justice judge in this world. So he was pretty like he's pretty high up in the world and stuff, and they all took this internet scene that she's showing here as this liberation thing that he did, and really he was just caught and it was videotaped or whatever. But eventually, after telling them all this, they do end up having this romantic relationship, and it goes farther into the future where we do see that this girl, and I'm drawing a blank at her name, but it's Bree. But Bree and Artemisio do like end up having this awesome relationship, and it goes as far as the future as we see Paprika and Dill, and then Pepper and her dude eventually meet the two, and eventually it looks like they're going to get married, kind of thing. And that's kind of that story. But like I said, I'm not going into detail on every story. But the next story is Anisette. Anisette being she was the like secretary for Sweet Paprika, and it's basically like a just a short little kind of comical, but sentimental story about how she finally found some love with this like kind of higher up person that works in the Inferium company. Um, the Prince and the Queen, I can promise, kind of warn you about this story. I mean, the name kind of gives it away. But regardless, it was still a pretty badass story. But it's basically about a high up executive that works under Paprika, that kind of wants to take, that idolizes Paprika as a role model, but at the same time doesn't want to disrespect his image, in her eyes, kind of thing. But he's kind of a perv, just like Paprika, and he's one of those ashamed type of guys, and it's kind of this like love fantasy that he has towards this like salesman guy. The next story is all about I can't remember her name at the moment, but these were basically that I'm drawing like both of them. This is a love interest from the book, and this is the one that tried to intervene. It's kind of a story about how they end up hooking up. And it's Anisette. I'm sorry, it's the same, but Anisette and I think his name is R. But how they end up getting together, and this one is probably one of the, besides Mirka's story, because Mirka is the one that drew the Prince and the Queen. But Stjepan Śejic, I think that's how you pronounce it, does the art in this story, and it is phenomenal. I mean, if you wanted a more realistic version of Sweet Paprika, it doesn't get any more realistic than this. Or maybe Frank Chow's cover, But this story was fantastic, how the two of them ended up hooking up, because neither one of them were bad people in the story, and they kind of, they kind of got kind of messed up by Paprika and Dill and their whole, love story thing. But I will say that story is from some more of the sexier, imagery and stuff like that. The very last story is specifically about Paprika and Dill, and it's basically like them, living their life as a couple, and it's basically kind of finding new stuff out of ordinary circumstances. It's just a story about how they go to a dressing room and Dill ends up messing up his wardrobe. He ends up changing into this pirate looking getup, which Paprika is not a big fan of, and it starts this whole conversation about their appearance. But basically they start switching clothes and it gets ultra sexy, and they kind of do this whole, like, they find out that Paprika's kind of a little bit into bondage kind of thing, and it sparks this whole new fantasy between the two. And that one is a really good story. But the very last story is about Burnet. And if you know the story of Sweet Paprika, Burnet was kind of the bad guy. He was the one that stole Paprika's story and literally plagiarized it and sold it, and at the end he got caught, and now Paprika, everybody knows that Paprika did it, but it's basically the what happened to him after the story, and it's basically he's working for this law firm under this Miss Saffron character or whatever, and he's basically not having a happy life at all, having to do endless hours now that he's known as this fraud or whatever, and eventually they keep trying to, Miss Saffron tries to keep making his life worse and worse and worse, and eventually he tries to come up with this plan to do something else, and it doesn't work, and they weirdly enough they end up hooking up together, and it goes so far as showing them getting married. But that is the last story in the book. There is this awesome page at the very end about some characters that were not featured in this book and how sad they were, like Dill's dad and Paprika's real boss and some other characters from the book. But basically that they're will probably show up in another book. The last thing I want to touch on before I end this review is, and give you my final thoughts, is there's an advertisement at the very end of this book featuring Mirka and Adolfo's next book, and it says that this book will be written by her and drawn by Laura Braga. Happens to be two of my favorite artists and writers. but I'm just gonna say pure evil. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Um, my final thoughts on this book was it's fantastic. It ties up a lot of threads that were left open during the series, in case you were wondering what happened to certain characters. And it looks like she has plans to do a second one, which ties up some more of the other characters, give you more definite, ending on what those people are doing or what they did after the story or kind of thing. I did like the prequel story with Artemisio and her mom and stuff. And the way it was presented, because you don't really find out it's them until a little bit later. But another thing I would like to add is the art. Even though it's several different artists during the book, and I did not name every single artist and writer, they are in the description down below. But the art in this book is fantastic. You can tell that Mirka went through with each individual artist and made sure that it fit in that world, and each one does in its own style and everything. But I really enjoyed it and hope we get a book 2. But that is my review of Sweet Paprika, Hot Black, White, and Pink. But let me know what you thought about it down below, and I will let y'all go. Have a great Saturday. Bye.